riggability is probably the selling point of this camera. 12K should have been seen as the target, but as maybe the limit that we can reach.
What's the sweet spot, would you say?
I think it's the combination of having an intelligent codec, an intelligent sensor, an intelligent workflow, and everything in such a small package.
Hello and welcome to the Scan Studio, where I'm joined by Michele, Senior Product Specialist, Digital Cameras at Blackmagic Design. And we've got an exclusive chat and hands-on look at the all-new, awesome Blackmagic Design PYXIS 12K camera. It's so good to have you here in the studio. Before we talk about this beauty though, let's talk about 12K in general. Why should people be thinking about 12K? What's the hype all about?
Cool. Hi, Nikki. So thank you for having me here today, first of all. And yes, let's jump straight into it. We got a couple of cameras here on a desk. One is the URSA Cine 12K LF, and the other one is the new PYXIS 12K. As you can see, obviously, what it says on the tin, both 12K cameras. So what's behind this sensor? This new 12K technology is for us super important. Sometimes people believe that we start building camera from the sensor onward, including the workflow that kind of ties to it. But we're actually not. We also own lots of different pieces of technology, and one of them is software-based, which is DaVinci Resolve. So DaVinci Resolve is the one that kind of like becomes sort of like starting point. We knew by looking at different cameras, at different color science, at different codec, at different sensor technology and geometry, what could be actually used at best, what could actually be sort of like shining the sensor technology behind each one of the cameras. Okay. So we found that there were some limitation connected to the sensor technology itself, as well as the codec technology. So in that sense, what came first was Resolve, analyzing what the market needs. And first of all, we had to address a couple of things. The codec, because again, they were heavy and not really manageable. And then the sensor. And these two things together were actually going hands in hands, because again, you can't have a good codec handling a bad sensor or vice versa. You can't have a good sensor with a bad codec. So we had to kind of like have these two things sorted in a way. So Blackmagic Raw came along, and then obviously we pushed the sensor technology to the point where the first 12K sensor was actually on a Super 35mm sensor, which then we pushed into a full frame sensor. So nowadays we got a pipeline at Blackmagic Design where we take everything from acquisition, so from the camera, at full frame or even larger, at higher resolution, with superb dynamic range, as well as color precision, so color fidelity, into different form factor, which then translate into a very neat and kind of like streamlined workflow within DaVinci Resolve. So although I said we started from Resolve, obviously then now we're going kind of like back in circle, and we can see how this becomes like a nice, easy workflow to handle.
You've thought of it all. You mentioned there, because obviously the first thing for 12K is I'm thinking gigantic files that nobody's going to be able to handle.
That's right.
So you've thought of that with Blackmagic Raw.
That's right.
But again, going back to the question for filmmakers, why should they be thinking about 12K? There'll be plenty of people out there thinking, my 4K camera's doing me great, 6K, 8K. 12 just seems like so far off in the future. Is it really though?
Well, it is and it isn't. Of course, as I said, when you think in numbers, of course, this resolution can be daunting, and I'm not hiding behind the fact that data rate could be something that kind of scares you initially. But thanks to the flexibility of the codec and the nature of the sensor itself, we can tame those sort of like issues very well, and we can be very bold the way we tackle this issue for mainly a couple of reasons. Talking about the sensor itself. First of all, we use a different technology behind it. Everyone is very familiar with the use of Bayer sensor in the industry, and it's been so popular, it's so efficient, it's pretty much everywhere. When you pick up a camera, mainly you have a Bayer sensor behind that. But we introduced a few years back this new sensor, which is an RGBW sensor, which allow you to kind of like, I would say, exploit the sensor in different ways. And to answer your question about why should we pick this 12K, well, 12K should have been seen as the target, but as maybe the limit that we can reach, okay? It's like training for a marathon. That is your target pace, and that is your limit that you can reach. So realistically, you can use a 12K in 8K mode or 4K mode, and that is the difference, because by doing this, by having an in-camera sensor scaling, we don't have to crop the sensor to use those lower resolution, which means that you don't change anything in regard to field of view, angle of view. You can pair it with the same lenses, therefore maintaining the same sort of aesthetic. So this is why you would pick a camera that has this technology behind. Then if you need to kind of like crank it up and maybe do your, I don't know, visual effects plate, yes, you can use the 12K, but if you don't, you can use the 8K and the 4K and take benefit out of it.
Excellent. So you've got options, and also,
Of course,
as you said, that alluded to, that you've future-proofed as well, don't you? So as things move on, you know you've got the capabilities to push this to 12K. Who's using 12K at the moment then? Can you give us some use cases of who's really running with this technology?
Of course. So I just mentioned briefly, again, when you push to the limit and you're pushing maybe the 12K, yes, you're looking at maybe people kind of like working in a visual effects department or production in that sort of line, or virtual production, LED walls, because again, we are facing an industry where now these big walls and big LED walls are everywhere, and they really rely on precise and high resolution or super high resolution. Therefore, those kind of industry or production are kind of like the customer for this kind of resolution or camera. However, when you're looking at the 8K and 4K market, we also need to consider those. So 8K is now becoming sort of like the way we capture in order to deliver pristine 4K, and then 4K is now in order to capture pristine maybe 2K, especially when you're looking at 4K and 2K, these are still the format that you see in cinema projection, okay? So 4K DCI or 2K DCI are still the majority of projection or the projector available in our cinemas. So this is what you want to do. Maybe if you're doing, for example, rotoscoping, 8K is going to be enough. Or maybe if you have to do like re-racking, you can use an 8K. So those production that wants to do any job that requires any post-production sort of like effects or re-racking, then they might consider shooting high resolution, or maybe stay in the middle ground for sort of like delivering at 4K or 2K.
So what's very much coming through is that both of these cameras are super versatile. You have got options, haven't you? And they're going to be very beneficial for a number of different use cases. So let's take a look at these specific cameras that we've got here. Yeah. I'm very excited. We've got the URSA Cine 12K here, and we've got the PYXIS 12K. Now we are focusing on this one. This is a new exclusive chat that we've got our hands on, so I'm looking forward to finding out more. But it'd be interesting to see how the two cameras compare to one another. So let's maybe talk about that. What have you taken from the URSA Cine and packaged into the PYXIS 12K first of all?
That's right. So the challenge for us was, yes, we started off with the URSA Cine 12K, and we realized straight away that I think the sensor was too good to just keep it in one single iteration or one single body. So the next challenge was like, how do we shrink the package and make sure that this technology actually can live in something that could be a bit more interesting for a different kind of operation, or a different kind of workflow, or different kind of uses, okay? And a lot of people in the market are always looking at the box form factor to be eventually a design that allows them to rig the camera in so many different ways. So riggability is probably the selling point of this camera. So you can see, you can start off with the camera which is super simple, and obviously
it's very compact
it's
as
super
well.
compact.
That's the first thing
and
I'm
lightweight.
noticing. Yeah.
So you can see this camera being used on gimbals. You can be used on obviously Jimmy jibs, or anything that might require a dynamic approach to the camera. So especially if you compare it with an URSA Cine, which might be slightly heavier, then you can see that the tools that you need to use, or anything, the piece of equipment you want to rig it with, or accessories if you want to call it, have to be of different size. Even if you're thinking about maybe just a little vest to have a Steadicam, to kind of like handle this camera would be very different from a glider, like a DJI Ronin or something similar to that kind of like allows you to use a low payload onto your gear to accommodate this kind of camera. So definitely the PYXIS has that sort of like idea in mind, kind of like cater for the small portable sort of like workflow as well as rig. So, and again, we can see this camera as in very compact, 3 different models as well. So differently from the URSA Cine, which has an interchangeable mount, on the PYXIS instead, you will have to choose your mount at the time you purchase it. So that means that you've got 3 models. One comes with the L mount, which is the current one you see here. Then we offer the EF, and you have also the PL version for it. Obviously, the L mount maybe will be the most versatile one because you can use different adapters to then go EF or PL as you please. So again, once again, you can pick up out of the right of the box this object, this camera, and then make it yours. Yeah. So really start using different accessories and different things that you might already own, especially if you're growing within the Blackmagic camera sort of world. We use basically things that are common or out of the shelf. We never use something particularly proprietary in a way. So everything is pretty standard. Even when we talk about connectivity, for example, we have, you know, SDI connectivity, which are super robust. So we have 12G output. And then obviously you got your timecode input. This is super beneficial when you're looking at a multicam shot, for example, when you have to sync the camera. SDI, as we said, is the kind of like the traditional connectivity for audio, video, especially in the broadcast industry, in the cinema industry. However, we do have a set of different connections here, which are not related only to video and audio transport, but also other things. You can see the camera has a network port here. So we got a normal RJ45 Ethernet port, okay? And that kind of like opens up to a different way we approach the workflow for the camera, because I think this is the real big thing about both our cameras and Blackmagic in general. We started this conversation with DaVinci Resolve for some reason, and we want to go back to it at some point, because no matter how or which one you pick up, at some point you will have to offload your media, go through a post-production process if you need to. Therefore, we need to understand how we get there, how quickly we can get there. So media makes a big difference, the media storage that we got in the 2 cameras, as well as this new connectivity that we get. How do we offload this media to the post-production tool? So the Ethernet port on both cameras help us in kind of like solving this issue. So these 2 cameras have a 10 gig port on board. So that means it's super, super fast transferring those data. And as we said earlier, those data are not tiny. I mean, the amount of data that you capture when it's like, you know, above 8K are huge, okay? Bear in mind that obviously Blackmagic Raw will help you with that, because it's a codec which is as flexible as a RAW codec, but as light as a video codec. So it's still very manageable, but still you're talking big resolution.
We actually use Blackmagic cameras here in the studio. I know we're all big fans. So the team working behind the scenes will want me to ask on their behalf, what are your options for media recording then with this camera?
That's a fair question, Nikki. I mean, obviously, whenever you pick up a camera, you need to understand, okay, I got this resolution, I got this 12K, 8K, 4K you're talking about, but let's address the elephant in the room. Where do I fit them? Where do I put them? Well, the PYXIS 12K has very kind of like off-the-shelf solution for that, and we don't want to kind of like create something which is difficult to source anywhere. So we opt out for the CF Express technology. So these are Type B media. We got actually two slots for them, so you never run out. Obviously, it works in such a way where the first one gets full, then it floats into the second one. But the other thing is that we never offer one only option. We always offer at least a couple of options in our camera. And in this case, we also allow the user to connect an SSD drive over the USB-C connection, so USB-C 3.1. So that means that you can use a solid-state drive like a Samsung T7 or something similar, just to name one. But this is what you can do, and this will allow you to, again, maybe overcome the price point limitation that you might find, because CF Express might be a bit more expensive in a way, but and the capacity is smaller in a way, but the SSD could be larger capacity, obviously slightly bigger to mount on the camera, but then at the same time you have maybe a better price point, because again, this technology and the price on that is coming down a lot. So at least 2 options for the recording, for the media.
We love options, and I know the team here will be happy to hear that you can record to SSD, which makes our life a lot easier in some of the situations we film in. Let's talk about the battery here on the back. I know it's a bit like asking how long is a piece of string, because it depends on various factors. But in terms of battery life, what are we looking at? Do you have a ballpark or any ideas?
You're right, Nikki. It really much depends on how you use the camera, the system. So as soon as you start using maybe a higher resolution rather than a smaller, or maybe as soon as you maybe using the LCD with the fullest brighter screen rather than using it at 50%, or if you're playing back your clip a lot, you know, when you used to do, oh, let's see this clip again, let's review it, then obviously you're asking the camera you're actually drawing more energy from the camera. So the good thing is that we actually opted for the BPU solution. That means that this battery comes in different capacity. So you can start from a smaller BPU battery like this one, like a BPU 30, and 30 refers to obviously the milliampere that you get in the battery. So that means that depending on the power drawn on the camera, you might get around probably 45-50 minutes on a tiny battery like this. However, when you pick up a BPU, you can also get a 60 or a 90. Obviously, they might stick out a little bit more from the back of the camera, but that also gives you a bit more capacity, so a bit more runtime on the battery life of the camera. So you got options. So it's good to have, obviously, again, like in the media, option to kind of like make sure that you never run out of juice.
Yes.
Obviously, if you are looking to source the camera with more power, or not more power, but longer for longer duration or more capacity, you can still use the 12 volts input and rig perhaps via D-tap a V-lock battery. And again, we talked about riggability earlier. So when we put the camera in a cage, there are a lot of lovely cages out there where you can actually stick a big V-lock battery, the one that kind of like tend to use on this camera system, on the URSA Cine system, and D-tap from the side with the cable that reaches on the camera itself. So there are plenty of options in order to kind of like source power to the camera.
Talk to me a little bit about why that came together. Is this listening to your audience, what people wanted you to produce for your next camera? How does that process work?
Yeah, I think you know, it's all of those together. We always constantly in touch and in contact with our customer base. And yes, this is where we collect all these feature requests, and we, you know, in the forum as well, we collect all these feature requests, and one of them, and the one that kind of like keep repeating over and over and over after the Pocket Cinema camera was announced, probably since the first Pocket Cinema camera, the original cinema camera, was we want the new Pocket Cinema camera. We want a new form factor. So the PYXIS really moved away from the Pocket Cinema camera form factor, and it wasn't embracing the URSA Cine. So we had something which, again, represented a new concept, so a new form factor, which we now are kind of like exploring a bit more. So this is, I would say, the second iteration of what is already the PYXIS. We launched the PYXIS 6K last year, and this year we got already the PYXIS 12K. So we want to capitalize on the opportunity of having a good design. So if you got good design, then you can build iteration over and over again and make sure they are kind of like unique in their own way. So the first point, for example, in terms of design, I remember having this conversation with one of the customer, and he was like, oh, these side monitors is brilliant, it's fantastic, but at the same time, it might be a bit reductive for me, or maybe I'm not going to see myself using the side monitor in such a way. Obviously, we want to solve a couple of issues. We want a camera that, as soon as you take it out of the box, is usable. So you don't have to gear it up too much. You just need maybe a CFast Express media and a lens and a battery, and off you go. This is what we want, okay? However, we also understand that, and through feedbacks, we come out with a line of different accessories, for example, okay? And we did it in such a clever way, I believe, which really, I think, it underlined how clever the design team at Blackmagic is, because the accessories that you see on the URSA Cine camera are actually perfectly usable on the PYXIS 12K camera, and vice versa. So everything you see lined up here in front of me, starting from an electronic viewfinder, very kind of like dear to the cinematographer, or when you look at maybe a PYXIS monitor, this is what we call the PYXIS monitor, that are really incredible accessories for both cameras, okay? And that solves a lot of different issues. Again, that same guy was like, I wish we had an external monitor where I could drive the camera menu, maybe even from maybe not really being attached to the camera, but I can move around. And well, hey presto, we had this little monitor where you got a USB-C connectivity,
Yep.
and that allows you to maybe attach the monitor on the camera, or even like keep it in your hands if you have to. So I can see this camera put into a zenithal position, looking down and having to control whatever with your monitor. So that's what we can do. And again, this is common on the 2 camera. So regardless which one you're going to pick up at the end of the day, you're still going to have a line of accessories that are designed for both.
Which is
So,
excellent,
yeah.
because there's nothing worse than buying the new generation of something and all of a sudden you've got to invest in a whole new range of accessories as well. So brownie points for that one. What I really like there as well is that the essence that comes through, that you really listen to the consumer as well. So somebody actually being able to go to one of your shows and say, listen, I need that, and you listen to it and you adapt your products, and that is what makes for a successful products line, of course. Talk to me then about how these two might work together, because in terms of a workflow, if you need multiple cameras, the two will work quite beautifully together, won't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, we always build the camera from the ground up, but with 3 main kind of like pillar in mind. So we always want to make sure that we offer camera with high resolution. We always want to make sure that they got fantastic dynamic range throughout and excellent color science. And these 3 things are actually in common with the 3 cameras. So we've got 2 cameras that can produce 12K resolution, 8K, 4K with the same RGBW sensor and with the same in-camera scaling, with the same symmetrical capture of the RGB, but at the same time offering the same 16 stop of dynamic range. And this is thanks to the technology again behind the sensor, that RGBW. That W is the power of the wide and the wideband filter, which allow you to kind of like having a different approach to the luminance value, hence also having a good response to light, which means high dynamic range in this camera. And then the color fidelity. The color fidelity is what we really need to kind of like preserve as much as possible. So we use Gen 5 color science for both cameras. So that means that when you go into your color post-production pipeline, it is going to look very, very similar. So you're not, you know, scratching your head, and or the colorist doesn't have to kind of like do too much in order to match these two models. So quite frankly, they work almost seamlessly between the two of you. So you can see this camera becoming either an A and B camera, so a principal camera and a B cam, or if you're not in the market for any of these kind of like big camera system, then this can just do exactly as well as the URSA Cine. So this is what we kind of like offer to the audience at a very affordable and interesting price point. So something that is totally unique in the market.
Always evolving and always listening to people that matter, which is the consumer, which is great to hear. You mentioned price point there. So in terms of differences between the two, what are we talking?
Yeah, of course, these two packages are slightly different. We got a camera that sits around the £2,800 British pounds mark point. This one is probably around body only, is around the 6.5-ish. But again, this is where these two kind of like path sort of like takes a different direction, okay? And this is why maybe it's also worth understanding what the differences are in the two packages. We talk about similarity as you said, and we are so happy to see that one is so similar to the other. But obviously now, why should I make maybe a decision based on not only on price point, because price point, yes, it's
important, but it's not the only
people,
consideration.
Yeah, for some people it's
is it?
super important. Especially if you are trying to be budget aware in your production, then yes, of course, the price point is important. However, obviously there are differences, because for as much as we don't want to compromise at any point in terms of picture quality and what you get in terms of feature set, there are still things connected to the form factor which will eventually distinguish or make sure that one camera does one thing and the other offer for other things. So This camera is for example, the URSA Cine 12K is a 24 volts system, which allows us to push the sensor to even higher frame rate. And when I say higher frame rate, I'm talking about 224 frames per second at 8K in a specific aspect ratio. So this is huge, but we didn't go that far off with the PYXIS. So the PYXIS is still very, very capable of 112 frames per second. But this is probably due also to the fact that the camera actually runs at 12 volts, so it's less power hungry in a way. But obviously it has, you know, and also the form factor kind of like determines what we can do in terms of like cooling the system. So if the camera was pushed to the limits, then you might encounter some thermal issues. So we want to make sure that the two cameras work efficiently without letting you down, without shutting down at any point, without cutting your clip, without, you know, running low on battery. So we need to make sure that those things are always taken in consideration when we design a camera.
Two exceptional cameras there, as you say. Of course, the URSA Cine has been hugely popular, and now the PYXIS 12K is kind of opening up that accessibility to 12K. What's the sweet spot, would you say, in terms of resolution versus frames per second?
That's a very good question, Nikki, because again, 12K, 8K and 4K have different performances, and the sensor react to these requests differently as well, in terms of frame rate, in terms of rolling shutter as well. So I would say, obviously the best things will be never to kind of like give away too much resolution, or never to give away too many visual opportunity in terms of like frame per second or the rolling shutter. So I would say the camera sitting at around 8K will give you the best shot, because again, you can even shoot at 112 frames per second in 8K in 2.4 to 1 aspect ratio, and having a fantastic rolling shutter around 6 milliseconds, and then still preserving a lot of resolution. So I would say yes, if you're asking me, you know, quite crudely, where is the sweet spot, that could be, you know, an 8K at that aspect ratio with that frame per second opportunity. However, as we said, you know, is horses for courses. So you need to pick the resolution that you need for the visual effects plate. Maybe you're pushing 12K, but you have to obviously bear in mind that then the frame per second will go down to 60. And then if you go down to 4K instead, you're saving a lot of space instead in your media, because obviously it's less resolution, but the same ability in terms of, you know, rolling shutter speed and aspiration. And again, once again, I want to point out the fact that whenever you're shooting at 12K, 8K or 4K, your aspect, so your field of view, stays the same. So don't feel that you have to use the 12K, 8K or 4K in a particular way because we don't crop the sensor. So that means that you maintain the same aesthetic, the same language, the same visual, regardless which resolution you end up using.
Excellent, thank you very much. Two exquisite cameras, as we said there, giving you options to shoot in 12K. I can tell you're a big fan. I am too now. The enthusiasm that you have for the PYXIS 12K is infectious. Thank you very much for coming in. Our exclusive chat all about this, and we'll look forward to catching up with you soon.
Thank you, Nikki.
You can order your PYXIS 12K from scan.co.uk today. Follow the link in the descriptions to the product page for more information.